So welcome to the to the session again, and this is the third session, and we're running these sessions consecutively on the presentation of the research results. And this is the third subtitle, and it focuses on two important areas that we will look at today, and it is presentation criteria and the credibility of research reports. And the learning outcomes is that the session should empower us to understand presentation. It's an error. I wrote there's a wrong a spelling error. Is to understand presentation criteria and credibility of research reports. We will continue as always. You know, I've got the beloved project. And you know what I've thought of today is that I will not stop using it as an example, because you are becoming accustomed to it. Those examples you will make you understand more, because now you understand the field of study. And I tend to enjoy and to identify more with this very first research project. And I will continue to use it as an example because it offers me a lot of cases, the way it is written, and I've even made those extracts. At the beginning of, I think 2 days ago, I thought I would not be able to handle this session because I saw it was too theoretical and I'll just read and get bored. But when I rethought, I found an opportunity to identify areas where examples will be there. And we will continue from time to time to look at those examples, looking at what literature says, but also trying to have a look at those extracts in various chapters of the research report, various sections, and different types of of examples. And as an introduction, you will remember that last time, in the previous, I think it was last week, that we looked at the contents of the research report, what it should entail. In other words, we were looking from a quantitative perspective. We did touch a little bit about the quality of sentences, quality of paragraphs, and the quality of work, but we did not go very deep. We did not drill very, very deep. Today is an opportunity to look at how those sections, all those contents should be credible. And then, in other words, we'll look at how qualitative they should be. We look at the quality. How better should an introduction be written? What it should go. We'll drill into that. But we don't have to do everything. We will not have to repeat everything. Things that we've done last week, I will try to skip, but focus on aspects that we did not touch last week. As an introduction, I'll read again. Scientific research should be made public and enable future researchers to cumulatively build on present findings. The other time when, I think maybe that Memadima was also here, when we dealt with the first theme one. Was it theme one? When we looked at Hammanskraal, were you there? We enjoyed that one. That was one way in which the research report could be made public. But today, one reason why we report on it is that the contents will even assist future researchers to even look beyond what we have researched. If there are any gaps that are there from what we found, and if there's anything that we've missed or anything that we think should further the objectives and the interest of the study and the basis on which the study was found, then we make recommendations. Those recommendations allow future researchers to build on our studies. So this is why it is said that our reports should be written in an objective and explicit manner. In other words, it must be understood. We must not write as if we are suggesting. We must make concise and valid recommendations, strong recommendations. The way in which a research report is structured and presented depends on the reason why and for whom the research was undertaken. You will remember that last time we even identified stakeholders to the research report, those to whom we need to report. Amongst those, we noted that there are people who commission the studies, there are the sponsors, and we also noted that the authorities might also be the ones that might require specific research projects to be undertaken. So these are the people who can even determine how we need to report to them. And we noted also in the previous one that the way in which we present, or the structure, the way in which we package information will vary depending on who is the recipient. So this is just a reiteration and an emphasis that the recipient of the information from the communicator, from the speaker, is the one who should determine how it should be packaged. That is why we said if people have got low level of literacy, even the way we package it, it should be simple. The way we package, we should also consider diversity, whether in terms of language and the educational level. So this is what is also being emphasized here. In other instances, a report could consist of a brief motivation for the need to undertake the research, a brief literature review, and an equally brief overview of the methods used. The major part of the report, however, could consist of the findings and recommendations, and this is what we will be able to see. We'll look at the findings and the recommendations. Although we will go to conclusions, we will then see and identify, we will, in other words, establish the linkage that is there in various sections and various chapters of the report, from the introduction to conclusion. We will even see how literature research is linked to all the other parts. And then that is the logic that is actually required. And it will determine the extent to which one ensures logic will determine the credibility of the research report. So I'm skipping title page and title because we did dealt with this in the previous one. I'm skipping notice. I'm skipping introduction, abstract, and table of contents. But I want to deal with cohesiveness of the organization of the report. And when evaluating the way in which separate parts of the reports are combined, some questions can be asked as follows. One question can be, is the report structured or organized in a logical manner, or does it contain unconnected fragments? You see, it is also not acceptable to just indicate, to write sweeping statements as part of the recommendations if this is not informed by the findings or the results. And we will later on in the following slides, we'll be able to demonstrate that the most important aspect that can ensure recommendations is the findings, because from the findings, we assign a meaning, and there we are informed of the status. And as a result, that is where we derive the recommendations and we derive conclusions. Does the literature review provide a link between the problem being investigated and the research design used? And we know that literature review allows us, particularly you've got two types of literature review. The one is at the beginning, at the introduction, where you do your background as that is part of preliminary literature review. But detailed literature review is done in chapter 2. All these parts of literature review must speak to the topic, must speak to the problem that is being investigated. And it is the basis on which we undertake empirical research, because there we occlude, we become baptized, and we master now the challenge and the status of the research problem that we're going to investigate. Now, from here onwards, I will be able to, when I cite some of the examples, I'll be able to go to reflect how they look like from the example that I have identified. Is the literature review conceptually integrated in both inductive and deductive approaches? Are important findings noted? These important findings, I'm going to argue that they've been noted, and I will be able to demonstrate it in some slides to follow. Are previously reported studies documented and critiqued? Are any gaps in the existing literature identified? Is an effective summary provided? We are going to look now at how previous studies were dealt with, how we made reference to them, and if we criticized them or critiqued them, we'll look at that one. And the gaps that are there, we will also be able to show, just as we open the next slides now. And this is where we will see how the gap was identified. And it is again from the role of vendor culture in nature conservation. This statement says, the cultural role of the vendor in conservation of natural resources has not been fully explored. Then we are pointing towards the gap. In spite of this, one becomes aware that a positive relationship has existed for a long time between the life of the vendor and their environment when one studies past literature on the vendor culture, vendor history, and vendor ethnology. And we've just indicated the authors of the various books and resources where these statements are covered. Now, here I'm indicating that we did not have anything that was specifically meant for nature conservation in the cultural perspectives of the vendor. And this is what I think in previous sessions we spoke about. We said the books, the resources that we got were mainly from history, from culture, and ethnology. And we demonstrated by showing those. Now, but later, now here is what is something that is closer to what the research was looking at. Later in 1990, Mabogo documented the uses of various plants by the vendor. Collectively, these sources provide a point of departure for a fuller exploration of the vendor cultural perspectives on nature conservation, because it was not fully explored. But what we have read and the literature that does have gaps, that is not necessarily focused, except the one by Mabogo. We could get some background, we could get some direction. And this has been used as a point of departure. So here, I believe that the gap has been clearly articulated. And colleagues, when you want to interject, you must do so. I will stop when necessary and when I want to ask for your comments. But let us see how the previous literature was critiqued, that which we thought does have gaps and which did not explore the topic under investigation fully. It says, in Africa, as elsewhere in developing regions of the globe, Western cultural assumptions have dominated people's view of conservation management. And this is by one of the authors, Chidumayo, in 1993. He felt that actually it was the Western perspectives in conservation that dominated our continent, also our region, SADC, as well as South Africa. Because of these, most of the available literature deals with conservation from Western point of view. One promising development has been that international conservation organizations such as the International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources and the World Wildlife Fund, the two of them, have facilitated the documentation of oral traditions about indigenous system of resource management. And resource management is a term which is closer to nature conservation. or nature conservation is also inside part and parcel of resource management. So this is what these authors are saying. But the two organizations, the UCNNR and the WWF, all of them are the ones who initiated to write something about oral tradition. And this is what it might be seen as closer to what this research project was about. Because some of this work has been carried out in the Southern African region, but in South Africa specifically, Mukhanane and Walker in 1995 recorded the culture of the Tswana-speaking people in the Northwest Province. You see, that is what has happened in South Africa. But a few papers such as that of Cunningham and Zondi focused on Zulu cultural beliefs and practices. Even when I'm still here, I want to say that when we looked at literature that I was saying I've looked at in preparation for conducting empirical studies, we noted a number of literature, such as one by Van der Waal, that was also not very old. It was of recent, I think it was 97. It is also something that has looked at our culture. So it is not true that it was only Cunningham and Zondi who focused on the Zulu beliefs, as well as Mukhanane and Walker who focused on the Northwest. But this is just some of the sampled literature, which we said was not necessarily about the Venda culture and nature conservation, but it was about some cultures that are there in South Africa, in KZN, as well as in Northwest. Let me pause a bit and give you an opportunity to make a comment if you have any. Time to make comments, colleagues.
Dr. Korombi, I don't have a comment. I don't know whether Swusi saw the system has kicked him out or maybe he has left voluntarily.
He might have been kicked.
I think
he might have been kicked.
And I saw that,
yeah, there was somebody calling me. Maybe it was him. If you give me a minute, let me try to find out if it is him.
Yeah, I'm very much interested in the gap that you indicated, that the study had some gap, which I think some scholar in the name of Mabogo or whoever tried to close. I don't know if I missed something before, that your study or the study that you did with the Bavenda culture, what was that gap in particular that was
the one that I was closing?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Actually, when we undertake research, we do literature review to find out how much work has been done on the topic under investigation. Now, here I was looking for anything that has been done focusing on the Venda culture and nature conservation. Then you noted that Mabogo did not necessarily talk about conservation. He spoke about ethnobotany, where he was investigating the uses of indigenous plants by the Bavenda. So it is closer to that. When I dealt with the variable, the conservation of natural plants, I used him as a source and as a point of reference to show that there is something called ethnobotany that he did. But also, I also noted that there was a professor at the University of Venda, Professor Ben van der Waal. He used to be in close contact with us because he was interested in conservation on natural resources. Then he spoke to me many times. But I noted that he also conducted some studies at Lake Funduzi. He wrote a paper there. And that paper I did read, and there I did find that there is something that has to do with conservation, and that has to do with the cultural perspective, because that lake has got such cultural significance. There was no way that when he went there and conducted research, he could not be told other things, or he could not collect information about the cultural perspectives, the norms and the standards that are practiced there. Then he wrote something like that. So the two of them did write something about plants and the culture and the natural environment, water and the culture. Ben wrote about water, and Mabogo wrote about plants. So I noted that they did not write everything about conservation. And then there is pockets and the bits of things that relate to what I've studied. So the gap that I was trying to do is trying to bring a total picture that would include plants, animals, soil, and water. Then the third one was family planning, because there population dynamics. Sorry, it is population dynamics, because the more people you have, the more pressure you have on the environment, because they will use it. The more people you have, the more they would want to use to collect mageda, wood, collect water, to plow, kill animals, eat, hunt, and do all those things. So then I had to consolidate everything, including population dynamic. So that was why I noted there was a gap. Can we continue now? As we continue, I'm going to skip the style, because this is what we dealt with in the past, in the previous session. And I want us to concentrate now on a bit on the technical requirements. I should be skipping, but let me make highlights on it. We will also have to ask ourselves something if we are to focus on technical requirements, to see if these have been complied with. For an example, if the report contains a table of contents, does the table correspond with the subheadings used in the text? In other words, we cannot say page 5 is the uses of plants when the uses of plants are found in page 10. Are all sources consulted and mentioned in the text cited in the reference list? Some people omit, and most of us do omit, references that have been cited, or sometimes we even put something under the list of reference without even having cited them in the text. Are these citations accurate, complete, and presented in the uniform style? There is a citation style, the Harvard methods that the UNISA is using. And I also noted that there is another method that psychologists, the School of Psychology, I don't know if it is School of Health Sciences, is using another citation style. I was engaging with someone who was using that style. So we will unpack this when we come to citation, if we will handle citation in the next session. Are there any signs of plagiarism? This we know that you cannot copycat, you cannot just copy and paste or reproduce someone's statements without even acknowledging their contribution. Even if I use my own words in the way that I write, if I don't acknowledge the source, then it is plagiarism. And I think Memadima is a professor in this one. Are the styles used for tables, graphs, and section headings consistent? Then it calls for us to be consistent in our approach, so that we don't confuse readers and we don't just produce messy reports. Are the tables and findings clear and understandable? Do the labels used for each table, graph, chart, or figure accurately describe the information presented? Because we cannot not discuss a table presented. When a table is presented there, it is difficult for people to make sense of it. If we don't write in words, we have to provide explanations. So even the explanations should not be at tangent. They should talk to what the content is all about. So this is what we are required to do. Do accompanying explanations or interpretations correspond to the information contained in the tabulated summaries? Even when we summarize, we summarize information after we've read the findings, and after we shall have had discussions. And actually, discussions sometimes may also summarize the findings, but the recommendations and the conclusions summarize everything. So all of these need to be informed by data. We will see later on in the next slides that data is always referred to as an important foundation for making decisions and for making discussions. And all of these will also be linked to the problem statement, to the topic that we have identified, to the sub-problems or the research questions or objectives, as well as the hypothesis if we have, or the assumptions.
Dr. Karombe?
Yes.
Before you come to the methods, I just wanted to maybe advise that if maybe students have a problem with referencing a citation and whatever, I'm working with the library colleagues who can do it practically for them to say how do they make citations, how do they reference without being seen to be plagiarizing. So because they deal with information literacy, so referencing, citing, and everything, they deal with it. So I'm saying, should you, if the students have a problem in that, they can communicate with you, and then I can invite the library colleagues, and then they can make a presentation to them.
Yes,
no,
it's correct. It's correct. I also have a full, the next workshop focuses on citation. And I'm going to confirm with you and Linda if it is necessary for me to deal with citation. And I can deal with it from my own perspective generally, but the librarian can be specific and drill and even close the gaps that might be there in my presentations. But for me, it's just to remind students that when they write, they have to cite and they have to comply with what the university requires. And those standards are there. And if there are guidelines written, then they should follow them. If they're not written, then they will be referred to the Harvard citation style, which they need also to follow. But the good thing is that when you talk about that librarian is a specialist in citation, it means they will be able to advise and guide correctly. We'll decide if I will handle citation or we'll leave it. Then I can go to other sections. Then I want to focus on objectivity. I've skipped methodology because we have dealt with that in the previous workshop. The requirement that research reports have to be written in an objective and accurate manner cannot be overemphasized. Now, we can also ask the following questions. Is the information presented in an objective style, or are there signs of bias and one-sidedness? And it is very simple. If somebody is biased, you can see them. They only write positive things about their topic and what they believe to be the truth. And there they lose it and they don't become researchers. They are not professional. I was one time interviewed by a colleague. He's a senior member in the department. This person, I had a PhD before him, a doctorate before him, and he was studying for a PhD. Then he comes to ask me questions for this purpose of ratifying what he believes on. When he asks me questions, he wants me to believe. He says, not so, not so, not so. So he wanted me just to say yes, yes, so that he can just go and finalize a report. And that is very, very dangerous. That person, I believe, even today, is not empowered enough, cannot stand and defend this report. And the reason why I make examples of what I've written, I'm ready to defend because this is my work and I've been very, very objective. And where I've got shortcomings and gaps, I allow critique, and this allows me to grow. And it gives an opportunity to our participants to actually grow in their critique and in their understanding of concepts. Now, here I want to have a discussion on how some of how I've reported, how I believe I've reported the results objectively. Because I'm going to make an example of this table that is there. And the table came after the respondents were asked a specific question. And it was about the practice of planting trees near graves. Is this still continuous? And you will hear. We can see that we've got responses that would say yes, no, don't know. There are three. You either know and you say yes, they're still planted, or no, they're not planted anymore, or I don't know if it is like that. And we sought responses from leaders because leaders had their own questionnaire and the villagers had their own questionnaire. And this is just a sample. Not that traditional healers did not, they did, but they were not included here. The table is only per for the villagers and the leaders. And you could see the total responses that the yes had 25% response, the no's were 67%, and do not know was 8%. And even just before I could go to the words, I want to say, remember, my studies was about establishing if the Venda culture plays a role in the conservation of natural resources, plants, animals, water, and soil. So if I were to be biased, I was going to make sure that anything that is provided as a response must say, yes, the Bavenda still plant trees next to graves. Because here, culturally, I had an assumption that we will plant trees in graves because I saw some of the plants that I knew growing in graves. Then I had a perception, man, this might have been a practice within the culture, so that if somebody is buried, then they plant a tree. It is where they will remember a person has been buried there. They would put stones, rockery there, and soil there, but they plant a tree. Some of the plants, such as musoso, is Synadenium cupulare. Musoso is used to plant there. And there's another one, what is that? Which is also
Chikopa. Chikopa.
Yeah.
Which is the aloe, I think, plant, sort of like a type of aloes, yes.
You see, I did not even inform you, but you are responding. I think even Mr. Ramarumo remembers this.
Yeah.
So, look, I did not force these people to tell me that trees are still planted in graveyards. Because to me, if they were still planted, it would mean that that conservation ethic, that caring of plants, caring of graves by putting plants. And we know that people are afraid to go in graves because they think there is spook, or there is chipuku, or ghost, or they will come across the dead. And so we know that those plants will not always be destroyed or be cut. So this is how ethically we are, and we observe those taboos. But let us just read, and you would hear how I've interpreted the results, because you can see from the results that people that said no, those trees are no longer planted, are more than the people who said, yes, trees are still planted. Only 25% said trees are still planted, which is a positive answer. Okay? But a negative answer say no. No, plants are no, those trees are no longer planted. You see, and I did not single the results and make this 67 a yes and 25% a no. So I would have been biased because I would have wanted more people to support what my thinking is. But when you do that, I say it is a risk of losing the most important aspects of research, which is objectivity. And you even lose what people know, what is the reality. Because you must remember, we actually compare these findings with other findings, because this is not the only section where we spoke about taboo. Because all this means that Ziaira ufaramuri ure mavidal. So it is a taboo maybe to touch trees that are in graveyards. Although I've not been told, my understanding is if they are planted there, because most of us are afraid to go there, we will not touch them. So listen to how I've interpreted this. I said, traditional leaders and villagers are not in agreement about the question. It is only leaders who think that trees are still planted around graves, because leaders are 8 in total, but 5 of them says, yes, the trees are still planted in graveyards. It's only 3 who said they don't know from the traditional leaders. So it means the majority of them are supporting the idea of planting trees in graveyards as a continued cultural activity by the Bavenda. But listen to this. The villagers reported that the planting of trees around graves refer to people who are tending tribal graves and not graveyards that are used by the general public. You see now? Now they are arguing that no, trees that are planted where it's in the royal family, in the royal sacred areas where chiefs are buried or where the royal family is built. Tree planting has been replaced. You see now, here they show that indeed it was done in the past. This is where I catch them. You see, although they said it is not taking place anymore, now they agree that it used to take place in the past. And this is what I was actually investigating. Tree planting in graves, in other words, which used to take place in the past, in other words, has been replaced by the use of flowers and tombstones for those graves that are situated in public graveyards. Other place where tree planting still takes place is around the graves of the members of the royal family. Now, you see now, they are supporting the statements by the royal family because the royal family says, no, yes, we still plant this. Because if you go to areas, to burial grounds, sacred groves where chiefs are buried or the royal family, there, I know that today the tombstones are actually invading those areas, but in the past, it was strictly trees, it was strictly the natural environment, natural part of the environment, stones and trees and soil that will be there on the graveyards. So this is how the responses since were, and I did not cook them because I know even if the 67 of the villagers said it is no longer in practice, but they also mentioned that it used to be done. So in other words, here we learn that there is an erosion of the cultural practices which was there. And we don't deny, because later on, all of these people who are reporting here, they've reported that the culture is eroding. And if there is a good example here, we'll be able to see that one. Then the final statement is that it is fairly clear from the responses that the culture of tree planting around graves is fast disappearing, because more people, which is 67% against a 25%, more people said that it is no longer. They say indeed it is disappearing, but all of them do agree that it was there, and that was a culture of the Bavenda which was practiced. So this is how I think it is. I tried to maintain objectivity to a greater extent. So this is one example on how these reports should be reported. You know, sometimes you might find that you ask a question from one person. So fortunately here we've recorded who has responded, and the people who know and people who did not know, people who said yes or no. Sometimes people who would want to generalize a statement that was mentioned by one person. But in research, we are allowed, if one person has mentioned an important statement to the research, we can indicate that there is one person who mentioned this, or there is a number of people who mentioned this. And that interpretation is not wrong, because it's like what the table is telling us here. It's telling us that few people who are only 5 are the ones who said, yes, it still happens. And they amount to 25% from all the 100%. So in other words, we are finding that in reporting, you don't have to force so that you can ban, you can be biased, because the results will still support you, whether you are receiving negative responses or positive responses. Let us move now. Towards this paper, okay, we can still ask the question, is the report an accurate account and or summary of the research design, the methodological procedures followed, and the interpretation of the findings? No. Let's leave the methodology because we dealt with that. Are any signs of misrepresentation, concealment, distortion, or fabrication evident in which the findings are no? Because we've already indicated that there has been objectivity. Are primary sources of data used or secondary data? This refers to what we have cited as sources when we were actually supporting the findings. I also want to skip statistics and want to come to limitations. We undertake research for various reasons. One such reason is to contribute to information that can be used to solve real-world problems. We've said it. There is different types of research, basic research, and the other one, I just forgot it, but it looks at, oh, it is empirical. No, what do we say? It is, it looks at real problems and solves it. But those are the two different types of research. However, irrespective of the objective of a particular research study, problems beyond a researcher's control can sometimes cause the study to be limited in terms of the time dimension, the size, the sample of the size, and the practicality of it. And all of this, they want us to indicate if there has been any limitations that we confronted during the implementation of the research project. And I'm going to demonstrate something here. Are any limitations in the research design recorded? Yes, I've recorded that. In terms of methodology, I will be able to indicate that one. How are unexpected changes to the research design reported? And we will be able to show that. Let's go to the next slides and show that limitations that we had have been reported. And I think I might have even commented on this one when in previous sessions. Okay, this is how some of the limitations were recorded, and they were recorded under Chapter 3 of the research report, which is methodology. The interviewer needed to exercise patience when interviewing leaders because villagers always visit them to settle community matters. This problem was to some extent obviated when the researcher decided to make appointments with leaders a week in advance. In other words, when we could not meet the leaders because of their commitment, appointments were done. The researcher found that traditional leaders were mostly only available to be interviewed during weekends, which were not always free of interferences, again, because of choros, gatherings, khutla. It was during weekends that the researcher was obliged to attend village gatherings, which are either referred to as koro or chibizo, in which he was introduced and welcomed. Although this procedure took up a lot of extra time, that is a limitation, it ultimately benefited the researcher because it ensured the cooperation of the villagers, which was vital for the success of the project. It also helped the researcher to develop relations with important role players such as the administrators and traditional leaders, and ensured his security, the security of the researcher. It also meant that he did not have to introduce himself anew every time he visited the individual households. This custom is accepted as a normal part of tribal life among the Bavenda. But here, the emphasis is that there was a limitation, that the availability of the tribal leaders was a difficult thing to overcome. But strategies had to be devised that they are met over the weekends. And it was also noted that even when we were to meet them over the weekends, even after making appointments, villagers would always visit them. And there will still always be some disruption. So we have to exercise patience so that we can continue with the study. So a limitation was the availability, the difficulty of meeting the leaders to be interviewed. Now here is another challenge, that there was a change that was there, and this we have to report in terms of the research design. It was decided that when we go to conduct interviews in each household, the interviewee will be actually the eldest member of the household will become an interviewee. Is the one who would respond, will provide information. But it was found that there were very few cases. There were cases, but although there were few, there were cases where the eldest member of the family could not be found or were not in a position to be interviewed. In such cases, the second eldest member of the household was interviewed. You see, the limitation was you have decided that you will interview a person from this household, then you skip 1, 2, 3, 4. In the fifth household, when you want to interview, you find that there is no one to interview, or the eldest person to be interviewed is not there. You don't go away without collecting data. You devise a strategy on the field. This is how social research is flexible. It allows you to adapt to the prevailing circumstances, to allow you to collect data in other ways. So the decision in the field is that when the eldest person is not there, the second eldest is the one to be interviewed. So all these things we are told we must record This is the reason why I recorded this information and how I actually sorted out all these limitations in the field. So, in other words, we have complied with what literature says. And then we are objective and we are straightforward in our dealings.
So, Doctor, I wanted to check slide 165, limitation. What is the objective of highlighting limitations? It sounded to me you highlighted limitations at the same time you had mitigating actions. So are you not highlighting stuff that is outside your control? That's the first question, Doctor. Sorry, Doctor. Sorry, Doctor. So that's the first question. Second question, slide 166.
Yes.
Changes in research design. So the plan is to interview a CFO. Unfortunately, the CFO is not around. So now I end up interviewing a second in command. So the famous question is, would I have obtained the very same responses if I had interviewed the CFO? So I'm thinking of a possibility of not getting the intended results because the intended instrument I did not find. Like in your instance, you wanted to interview someone who's 60, you end up interviewing a grandfather who's 45 in terms of exposure and experience and the like. Thanks, Doctor. Those were my two questions.
Okay, let me start with the first one. You see, the author here just said categorically, are any limitations in the research design recorded? You know, in research, you see, when you get experienced, you will enjoy research. That is why I tell you, if you have done your research, even if you are a novice, a starting researcher, I tell you, you are the master of what you have done. No one will touch you. Not even a professor or a dean of school or any head of any institution can be against you because no one has been there when you were in the field. And no one has conceptualized your methodology and your topic and your research. You are the only one who masters it. Now, here, they want to know, is there anything that might have become a stumbling block in you, in stopping you from achieving the intended objectives of the research? Look, actually, you will hear that I'm answering the second question indirectly. Remember, when I go to villages, I'm going to interview everybody who speaks Tshivenda and who understands the Tshivenda culture. So the Tshivenda culture, you might find that the senior person, the eldest person there, is 80 years. But the second one, who might be the son, the firstborn, because males might stay with their parents. You must find he is also 65 years retired. He is like me. But the father is 80 years. You see, although there's differences in experiences in terms of the ages and the life experiences that they've come in, but at least a 65-year person who is in a rural area in either KZN or Limpopo would be able to understand the Tshivenda culture or the Zulu culture or the Xhosa or the Pedi culture to an extent, and they can relate to it. By the way, some people, there is a perception that older people are more forgetful than the youth. It might be true in some instances, it might not be true, because some cases say that the older you become, the more sharper you are. But this argument that I'm presenting allows me to specifically say that there is no there isn't a lot of material difference to an extent of actually compromising the findings of the research between the person because of the age difference between either 65 or 80 years. So if I go to the other one of the CFO, remember, a CFO is just a head of finances in an organization, but he has got other line function managers. He has got if a CFO is at the level of a DDG, then you've got a chief director who might be equally competent as a CFO. You see, some of the CFOs got these positions, they were given because they were liked, or they're not even educated. You find that the chief director, the second in command, are the most useful, are the most strong ones. But the CFO is just maybe a leader of finances. But the people that are very instrumental, your chief directors, your DDGs, these are the engines. And you can make your own self-determination if you think there will be material difference between the people who are going to give you responses. Then in that case, maybe, you see, when you deal with purposive sampling, the reason why I wrote that statement is because mine was systematic sampling, that you must skip 3 households, interview the 4th one, skip 3, interview the 4th one. So if I don't find anybody there, then I would be forced, if I don't interview, I would be forced to go to the 5th one. Then I have to motivate why I have skipped. But in this case, my strategy was, in that household, let me find somebody who at least can provide answers. And the other thing is, although I would be given some, if I'm given poor quality responses, you must remember, I'm going to interview 100 people. They will either support or actually throw away whatever the other person has given, if that response is not good. So this is how I can respond to that other one. Is it fine? Can we continue?
I'm covered, Doctor.
Okay, thank you very much. So this is how we said we record all those limitations, because we want to show that there were stumbling blocks. But the good thing is that you cannot just, in terms of social research, because it is flexible, it allows you to actually address the problem in the field. And then when I come back, I've got good results and enough information to make decisions. And we will continue, and then let me quickly move to look for places where there are examples. Therefore, when evaluating the presentation of reported findings based on our own research, the following questions can also be asked. Are the findings related to previous findings reported in the literature survey? And I think I might have demonstrated this in the previous session, but I will also revisit. There is a slide that I've borrowed from the previous session. We'll immediately after this slide go to it and show you that the previous literature was actually acknowledged. If it supports the findings, it was said. If it does not support, it was also said. To what extent do the findings support the hypothesis? Then to a greater extent, be able to demonstrate that one. Now, here, data related to previous studies by Van der Waal. It reads like, protection of sacred areas conserves aquatic, terrestrial, and cave ecosystems. Of specific interest is Lake Funduzi, which is the only true natural lake in the interior of South Africa. So it means Ben van der Waal, when he was doing research, he said it is the only inland lake in South Africa. And it is among these sacred areas. From the above, it can be deduced that sacred areas contribute to the conservation of a variety of ecosystems than just a single environmental phenomenon. Because above there, my findings was that cave ecology, cave ecosystem, terrestrial means something in the bush or not in the sea, not in the water, but aquatic will mean in the water. So in the water, in the caves, and out there in the open. So these are all areas where sacred areas play a role in the conservation. And Ben has actually recorded one of these as Lake Funduzi. So I've acknowledged the previous literature, which is by Ben van der Waal. This is just to demonstrate that I was swimming in the same as asked by the author. Does the study accomplish its goal and objectives? Yes, it does. I will also again demonstrate it like that. Do the findings contain answers to the research questions and or hypotheses? We'll see it in 170, and again in 170. In 174 here is an error. It's not 74. It is 174. So let us go and see in the next slides if the research has indeed achieved its goal and the objectives. My objectives were referred to as sub-problems. Here they are. Here is the goal now. The main objective, which is the goal of this study, is therefore to determine the extent to which the Venda culture already practices the conservation of natural resources. For the purpose of the study, the researcher will focus on the following prominent conservation aspects as sub-problems. This is an extract from chapter 1. And here, that is where I had a problem of a statement of problem. But I've captured the main objective there, which is equivalent to the goal. And in order to achieve that one, there were 1 to at least 5 sub-problems. Then we want to go down to the report and investigate areas where we have given effect to this. And if we agree that we have given effect to this, in other words, we shall have even achieved the goals and the objectives, the goal and the objectives of the study. But let me read this. This focus area should elicit information that will be useful in establishing the extent to which Venda culture contributes to nature conservation. Let me go and find out elsewhere in this report, whether it is in the finding, whether it is in the recommendations, whether in the you see now the table, the table of contents has this. It has got personal information. It has got cultural perception and conservation of land, which is, we are saying, is on page 28. Cultural perceptions on the conservation of water, 42, and this is what was contained in the in literature. So literature did look at this in giving effect to the sub problems. But let's continue and see if, when we conducted empirical studies, other sections or other chapters of the report also have something that shows that it's supported, and we did investigate all those reports. Now, we had these assumptions. In this study, the researcher makes the assumption that cultural premises and beliefs always influence people's perceptions and that they are dynamic phenomena. The researcher therefore believes that the successful functioning of any traditional society depends on the extent to which it is faithful to its inherited culture and traditions. The researcher also assumes now that the Bavenda people have been interacting with the natural environment for a very long time in order to ensure. This is an assumption or a hypothesis that we had at the beginning of the study. And we want to see if indeed we have tried to actually follow when in our research, if we have given effect to this. And we'll find it either in either conclusions, in other chapter on discussions, or data analysis, which is the presentation of findings. Now, here it is now. We said our assumption is that the Bavenda people have been interacting with the natural environment for a very long time. And let's look at what follows now here as part of the results that were presented to show that indeed they were interacting with the natural environment. And this was a question about the rituals which are performed before the collection of medicine. And that ritual shows that indeed people do interact with the natural environment. It is plants. It is like this. Rituals that relate to specific trees such as Brachyphylla sanguiberica, it is Mutabatsindi in Chivenda, and Milicia stillmania, require that a traditional healer be naked when he or she collects material from them. It is believed that anyone who tries to collect these plants, Milicia stillmania, when he is not naked, will become insane or mentally disturbed. Even when traditional taboos are being observed, one has to slaughter a lamb or chicken and sprinkle the blood on the roots before collecting materials from Brachyphylla, which is Mutabatsindi. So this is a ritual that has to be done. Slaughter a lamb or a chicken, then take the blood, sprinkle on the root before collecting the roots. After parts have been collected, the meat of the slaughtered animal is roasted and eaten. the bones of such slaughtered animal will later be thrown into the hole, which was excavated and covered with soil. You see now? Now, this is how traditional leaders, which are the Bavenda, interacted with the natural environment. They dug the soil. They collected the medicinal plants. They collected the bark or the roots of Mutabatindi. So they were going to use it for medicine. But there were prescriptions, rituals that have to be followed so that the medicine will be useful, or they will not become insane, or they will not be disturbed mentally. So this is how I thought we could argue that the Baventa indeed, as assumed earlier on, did interact with the natural environment from a long time ago. So this is how I thought if we investigate this aspect with this assumption in mind, something will be revealed. The extent to which these people protect or don't protect the natural environment will be revealed. Here, when they sprinkle the blood, then it is a show of respect. When they become naked, then it means they also respect. And if they don't do that, they know that they will become insane or be disturbed mentally. Now, here is
Doctor.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I'm fascinated by the nakedness of the traditional healer, but I want to also give an input, or maybe check with you as the senior researcher, that when they do Mpaso,
Yes.
the Mpaso is one of the ritual where you are appeasing the ancestors, for Emmanuel, David's sake. Actually, maybe you guys, you don't share the same practices as us. They use
no, if David is Mshona,
is it Mshona?
I don't know.
Oh,
I'm saying if he is from Zimbabwe, then it is a Venda. But there are the Venda people staying there. There are the Shonas who are close related to the Bavenda. They speak the same language.
I know.
Related culture. David, you cannot be lost here.
He will answer for himself if he's Shona. Yeah. So you know what? I'm fascinated by example that you gave. That in the case of Mufura, that they put on that sort of like an altar where you go and do the Mpaso. Why specifically that Mufura or that Morula plant? Even when I was doing another project on the show.
I'm not sure, but
sorry?
You see, the traditional healers believe on specific types of trees. There are trees that cannot be brought home because Ziaira. You see?
It's taboo.
It is taboo. And there are trees that are used for medicine. So somebody who has got a headache, they might use chumbe or other plants. It depends on the traditional healer or the availability of that plant in that community or in that area. If in the bush you don't have, you see, there are plants that can be used alternatively. If you don't have the other one in that area where you stay, at least there should be the equivalent of it that can be used. But this specific case, I'm not sure what the rationale is behind. But I do know that there are plants that are used for different types of ritual.
Okay. Okay. But I think my interpretation as a language and cultural activist, I will say, remember Morula, you make beer out of Morula. So my interpretation might be, I'm just thinking from the top of my head to say, maybe when they use that that plant is to say it will grow there, and then the ancestors will be drinking more beer from those marulas, because we use beer and the traditional beer and what have you to appease them, to say take and
Yes.
drink and then quench your thirst and. So I'm just, it's my own interpretation. So
Yes, it is okay. It's allowed in research to assign meaning to what you see. You can assign meaning either
okay.
to a finding. You interpret findings. That is a very good interpretation, by the way, and it matches with the way with this presentation, because this is how to present the findings. Okay, thank you very much. I think we can continue. Anybody can interject. And on the screen, I have got this tree, which is Mutawasin. You can see that the bark has been peeled. Yes, to show that this is a plant that is sought after by many people, and the people commercialize this. They carry it with bags. They go and sell it in urban areas, and then as a result, most of these plants can even become endangered. So as a result, the Limpopo province, and it was when I was still in the former Republic of Venda that we established a protected area there, a sort of a nature reserve to protect this plant. On your way when you're going to Mwanedi, before Matavera, there is a village on your right there. That is the area where Mutawasinde has been found, and we collected it there while I was still working. And then the nature reserve is there. So this is a way in which they are trying to protect it, because it is disappearing. And now they also in the literature have asked about the social and practical implications of the findings, and in the recommendations every time, when you close your research report, you make specific recommendations either for future research or for the practical implications, management implications, what people should do with the findings. This is where you do. Now, I've extracted one of the recommendations here to show the practical implications of the findings, as well as the social. It is a recommendation number 6.19. It says, management strategies for indigenous protected areas need to be documented so that standardized approaches can be implemented. Implementation may also be extended to the management of scientifically managed protected areas that lie on the boundaries of indigenous communities. Such an approach can lead to the development of management programs that synthesize both indigenous, cultural, and scientific approaches to the management of protected areas. Now, the practical implication is that we noted that the Chivenda already, when I was towards the end of the studies, this was after the results and after the discussions. Now, we were making recommendations. I have already found that the results say that because of the taboos, of the respect of the natural environment, the cultural perspectives and the norms and the standards, the Venda culture already shows an ethic of conservation, caring for the environment, because they use it. Then I felt that ethic is important. And so that it does not get lost, we can synthesize it with the scientific approaches. Because I noted that in the Chivenda culture, for an example, your sacred areas like Zuyendeulu, where the chiefs and the tribal the tribal clan is buried, are protected by rituals and cults and the taboos. You don't cut any plant there. You don't just go there. We have seen, and we've said it last week, that when you go there, you become mad, or you are lost. So those areas are protected by the rituals and the culture of the Bavenda. Whereas in the conventional way, the Western way of protecting is to put a fence behind, so that if anybody that jumps the fence is arrested or is taken as having trespassed. So the same principle is the same. If you go to Zuyendeulu, you are not allowed, you trespass there, then actions are taken on you, you become mad, or you are lost. In conventional way, they will take you to the magistrate and do anything, punish you, put you in jail for some other time. So I'm saying, if we synthesize the two, then we are going to have a rich strategy for the management and sustainable maintenance of the resources in the Venda culture, particularly when it comes to the Bavenda, because they will then simply accept the scientific or the conventional way, because they already know that in their culture, they also protect it. So this is one of the implications that I thought I should bring forward as a demonstration that the study does have a social implication and practical implication. Social means that from a cultural perspective. Practical means that the two of them are jellied together, that they are mixed as a conservation approach. Are the conclusions consistent with and supported by the data? This we must look at. We are saying, yes, see management implications. We just looked at one of the management implications. We'll try and look at that. If those management implications, you see, although we will say conclusions are based on the data, data does not jump to conclusions. Data must first be discussed. And when it has been discussed, we make recommendations. From recommendations, then we make conclusions. So we must see that logic. From the findings, then we go to what was discussed, assigning meaning to the findings, and then the recommendations from the main points, as well as now the overall conclusion. So we want to look at the management implications, if indeed they show that, that every recommendation and the conclusions were actually based on the data. Let's move. Oh, we will see it later on, because here we've got a lot of questions that we've got to answer. We also have to say, do the conclusions contain suggestions or recommendations for future research? We will also look at that in the next number of slides. We cannot go there immediately. Do the conclusions contain a logical synthesis of the main points? We will point, I've noted that these are main points, this is data, and these are recommendations for future research, and these are ordinary recommendations. Some recommendations are practical, some are for implementation in policies, some are for conducting future research, because we must close the gaps that have been identified or that could not be closed with the present study. Yeah, here are the management implications and conclusions. And here we want to see what was recommended for future research. And this was from chapter 6. And 6.1 is mainly about that, but it has got 6.17. Let's read that one. Since most of the sacred areas are nowadays too small for conserving biodiversity, a pilot project should be conducted in order to identify ways of extending the creation of larger ecological areas. In other words, you've got sacred areas, Chendeulu, which is not a very large area, but it is there as a core area where conservation is practiced. But if you extend its boundaries and make it larger, then you are establishing a protected area, like your Bugarapuka, your nature reserve, game reserve, something like that. So it is this recommendation seeks to advise that research should be investigated, if it is not possible, to extend the size of these so that we can actually establish larger protected areas. There is a need to survey, another recommendation for future research. There is a need to survey all existing culturally protected areas so that an adequate database may be established. We don't know how many culturally protected areas are there in Venda. In other words, the sacred areas that are still protected. We don't know how many there are. But if we establish how many there are, we shall have a database. And if we want to establish a program of protecting them or merging them with conventional Western areas approach, then we know that we are focusing on 80, which are the river, the water resources, such as the fountains and the lake. Or we're focusing on sacred forests, the burial areas, or we focusing on caves, such as is it Ralubimba, the cave of Ralubimbi. So all these, if are known, they can assist us in establishing a database that can also assist us in promoting their conservation. It is necessary to identify the extent of the damage that has already been identified on each of these areas so that a master strategy can be devised to address all the relevant problems and their sequences. In other words, all these three are talking about culturally protected areas. No, is to identify, to find out how many are they, and then how much damage is there, and what we can do with them to promote their conservation. Another recommendation for future research, development of management programs that synthesize both indigenous cultural scientific approaches to the management of. This was an example that we cited when we want to show that there is cultural implication and there are practical implications out of the recommendations.
Dr.
Yes.
K, I know you
Yes.
cannot see the hands. Sbusiso has his hand up. I'm not sure
Yes.
if it was by error, Sbusiso, or you want to interject.
I know, Madima, there's no room for error. It was a purposive hand.
No room for error.
No room.
Okay, no, fire on. No, I could see that
Doctor, I wanted
doctor
to check.
cannot see your hand because of the presentation.
All right.
Okay, go
Doctor,
ahead.
I wanted to check, Doctor, on your 6.1. Is it proper to propose or suggest future research through replication of your study? I'm not sure if you are done, because I can see it's 13, maybe there's 14. Can you propose that, yeah, maybe to ensure consistency and what this can be replicated probably in KZN, because it sounds like you've got very difficult names for these indigenous plants, but I know them in Zulu, but I can't translate them. Thanks, Doctor.
Yes, it's you can make every recommendation, and actually the author recommended that we be creative and not fear to recommend that which we think will assist in future examination. I think it is still a good thing because it can actually enrich the area under investigation. Now, the other recommendation is South African policies on hunting should be reviewed so that they support sustainable traditional hunting methods. You know, nowadays when you hunt, it is a firearm. It's a long rifle and a pistol or a revolver. But in the past, it was a bow, you remember? And in the past, we use snares, those that we hook on the neck of the animal. That is what we do. And sometimes with birds, it's catapult. And with fish, it's muteva, a cage that we put in the water. And there are a number of, there's something which is called chifu in Chivenda, where you chase an animal, you force it to go. When it falls, then it is wounded, then you kill it. So all these are not very, with these methods, you don't kill a lot. You kill just sufficient to go and supply the family. Sometimes you don't even kill because hunting is a difficult method. But nowadays, you will chase animals with a helicopter, with a rifle. Then when it is running away, you're chasing it until you kill it. You see, in our culture, if it runs away, it outruns you. You won't catch it anymore. It goes and escapes and it survives. So these are the methods that we are saying are sustainable. You see? So this is one of the recommendations. Because of the use of tombstones over sacred graves. Because the use of tombstones over sacred graves was not a traditional practice. The manner in which continued tree planting might be encouraged needs to be investigated. Because you remember we made an example of this when we were showing a table, that the practice it is disappearing. So if it is disappearing, it means less plants are going to be planted on graveyards. So here I'm saying, let us investigate how we can restore it, how we can maintain it. The other one, the ecological impact of tombstones in graveyards should at the same time be investigated. You know that if you've got tombstones, when it rains, water, it impact on the rate at which water infiltrates. Water does not go down because it stands on the slab. But if there is no tombstone, it is trees. Trees actually promote the infiltration and the percolation of water into the ground. So this is a natural environment and good for the ecosystem. And it sustains the soil moisture and therefore the sustainability of your vegetation. The other one is there is a need to develop strategies and mechanisms to the in-situ conservation of genetic resources of indigenous vegetables. This only means that indigenous vegetables can also be grown in nurseries or through conventional methods, so that these can be sold and can be replanted in degraded or disturbed areas. The last one, I think research should also investigate the possibility of growing other indigenous medicinal plants that are not currently being propagated. You see, there are somewhere where they've established, I think in Mpumalanga, they've established orchards or nurseries for medicinal plants. So this ensures that people don't go to the bush and damage the bush or destroy the bush, but medicinal plants are close by. And when they need them, they can harvest them. And those that can want to buy them, because they stay away either in urban areas where plants do not grow, they can buy them from these commercial nurseries. So this is one of the recommendations that has been made. So recommendations are there now. This was the question that was asked, if recommendations are there for future research. So this was just an extract from chapter 6 to show that in chapter 6 was dedicated on the recommendations. And among the recommendations, there were those that dealt with future research. Some dealt with the policy implications at the time.
Doctor?
Yes.
Can I make an input on the issue of this tombstone, because it's really starting to disturb me now.
Yes.
Because you see, this tombstone for me, it actually even affects, that's my view. It affects even the ecological system. Because remember now, with those slabs and whatever, it means the decomposition, which will result into an ecological system that will,
enhance soil fertility.
Yes. So, this issue of us moving from the cultural practices, it is very detrimental to the ecological system, and hence now we find that we are neglecting the issue of food security, and it impacts. Now we are crying foul to say, food is very expensive, and because of practices like this, where now we are adopting the Western culture, where now we're getting fancy about a nice tombstone, because I think you can put a symbol on that tree that has been planted, where I'll be able to identify, to say my father, it's has been laid to rest on this part. So it's just an interesting comment for me from your study, to say maybe a further study can be made, out of this issue of having this fancy tombstone, hundreds, and people put tombstone for 200,000 just to kill, to destroy the
environment,
the environment and the ecological system. So I just want to make that comment, because really it sort of like open your eyes to say, we think we are very smart, whereas we are, because we are moving from our traditional practices or cultural practices into Western, but not knowing that the damage that we are doing is so. Yeah, I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you, Doc.
Yeah. No, my pleasure. We move now to conclusions. I think we were asked if our conclusions, if I'm not mistaken, were based on the data. And I said, you see, there should be logic in all the chapters. The findings will be there in chapter 4 in my case, but the discussions of those findings are in chapter 5. And in chapter 6, that is where we got the recommendations that we're talking about, the tombstones and many more others. But here I'm going to show that the conclusions were based on what the findings were. And I want to make reference to many sections of the report and many chapters. And we go to paragraph number 1 of the conclusion. We'll read it. And I want to show you, I will show you where it comes from, and then where it has got those linkages. It reads like this. This research has explored traditional Venda cultural knowledge about nature conservation in some depth. Central to this nature conservation ethic are taboos, the rituals and beliefs. Those I've underlined because I know that there is a specific section where they were discussed and that have been established in Venda culture since time immemorial. And now, under chapter 5, where we've got discussions, the Venda taboos were discussed under 5.1. And the data, which was on chapter 4, I'm going to open to show you how it looks like. So this is an extract of chapter 4. And that is where we'll see that the taboos that I made conclusions on were not thumb-sucked and they were not just coming from my head. It is what we collected. And this is what we were told. We had question number 1.1, and we were asking traditional leaders, traditional healers, and villagers. It means all groups of the respondents. And because each one of them did have their separate questionnaire, if you remember what we said in the past. But let's just hear what they said. And this is raw data that I presented without even analyzing. It says, no, actually it's data analysis, but it is raw data, it is the findings. You will hear how I've written the results. It says, respondents referred to customary taboos that were important for the control of the land use. Among these was the observance of taboos during funerals and during the carrying out of rituals like Roto za Shango, which literally means to cool the territory. This, I think you will understand from the Venda perspective. Different taboos are observed for different periods of time. Thus, for an example, funeral taboos may be observed for 2 to 4 days for commoners, which are the villagers, but for up to 2 weeks for chiefs. It was also considered taboo to sow maize and other summer crops before seed mixing, usuk ambeu, which is a correct literal statement from Chivenda. If usuk ambeu has not taken place at the chief's kraal, it would be taboo to sow maize and other summer crops. This was always done before the first spring rains. You see now, this is raw data that was presented in chapter 4. And so I'm just demonstrating that these conclusions that you see here that have made reference to all those taboos, it is because taboos were reported in the findings and they were discussed under chapter 5, part of the discussions, where the title was read these Venda taboos in nature conservation. And we go again to paragraph and find that there's continuation of talk about the taboos, and we'll again see them under 5.2, chapter 5, under the discussions. And then these taboos read like this. Sorry, the statement reads like this. These taboos obliged people to perform various kinds of rituals before they used certain categories of natural resources. Taboos of this kind did not enforce a total ban on the use of natural resources. Their primary purpose was to establish control measures that would promote a sustainable utilization of resources. And this discussion is available, as I've said, under chapter 5, 5.2. Then paragraph 3 also says the complementary nature. Now, this is no longer about taboos, I believe. This is knowledge, indigenous ecological knowledge. It says the complementary nature of both the scientific and Venda cultural approaches has been emphasized in various parts of this research. And that is where I said, if we synthesize the two, then we benefit. Important traditional Venda contributions in this regard are the sustainable use of natural resources, indigenous ecological knowledge, and a holistic approach to environmental management. In other words, under 5.1 for 5.3, we discussed about indigenous ecological knowledge of the Bavenda. So it was not possible for me to extract everything, but let's see if in the next sections we'll see some extracts that support us. No, we don't have them, but we'll see at the end of this slides. But we also in paragraph 4, we read that credit should be given to those vendor traditional institutions which played a role in the development of an environmental management policy. Key factors that ensured success were, among others, the careful planning and joint implementation of programs. All these strategies promoted a positive relationship between the Bavenda and their natural environment. In our culture, when a fountain is silted or is polluted, there will be what we call DAB, which is group work, which is organized by women. They go there and go and clean the fountain, and it is referred to as Ukapa Chisima. You see, this is done in groups so that people are commissioning it as a project. It is an environmental project. Another part is when there is a need to protect the fountains. Men will go and cut logs and carry them to go and make and build them, as well as building rockeries for the protection of the fountains. All these were projects and programs that were implemented jointly. Now, this discussion is available in 5.4, under discussion, which says nature conservation and environmental management projects. Paragraph 6 and 5 also are conclusions, but they are also based on the discussions and the data. This research has also made it clear that cultural practices that are central to the vendor conservation ethic are being steadily eroded. As a result of this unhappy situation, the natural resources of the Venda region have deteriorated drastically or radically, both in terms of quality and quantity. It is therefore true to say that traditional Venda approach to nature conservation plays a far lesser role than it did in the past, because these practices have been eroded, they've disappeared. That is why we heard that the planting of plants in graveyards is no longer practiced. So even in other natural resources, the old practices are no longer maintained as they were.
Doctor?
Next slide is a linkage to the data.
Doctor?
Yes.
Dr. K?
Yes.
Yes, Busiso has his hand up and no misses.
Okay. Okay, is Busiso?
Am I audible?
Very
Yes.
much.
Yes. Doctor, I wanted to check in terms of progress and advancements when it comes to culture phenomena.
Yes.
Are there any ethical considerations? You know, like I'm really into this research, but when people are naked, you know, I'm thinking, hey, did you have to get an ethical clearance, or like the whole thing about culture? Because I know we practice a lot of culture as Africans, which in some instances has been viewed differently by other forces. And even the 2000s, they view some of these cultural practices differently because they view themselves as yoke. What's your view, Dr.?
You know, I used to disagree with a lot of what is written, because some authors are from Western countries. In our culture, when you speak to an elder, you sit down. But from Western perspective, you stand. It's a sign of respect. So it is the opposite. So when you are conducting this research, you have to understand the culture of the people that you're dealing with. And ethically, if you don't respect them, they will chase you away. If you enter someone's house, you go to a homestead, you just enter there and stand, they're going to chase you away. Because when you go there, whether you are given a seat or there is no guba or a stone to sit on, find a way of sitting down. If they will feel pity for you because you are respecting them, they will give you a chair if there's nothing to sit on. But in our culture, those round houses, the rondavels, always have some seats around them. That is where we sit. And sometimes you have got mufunda, you will sit next to mufunda. Next to mufunda there is guva that sits. We call it guva mlocho. So the ethical practice does not only have to be in writing, it must also be in practice. So you will not succeed in collecting data if you don't respect the culture of other people. Ethically, your code of conduct must be seen to be acceptable to the culture where data is being collected.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I think I don't know. I thought maybe Sbusiso is asking if maybe if you want to conduct a research, maybe say in a village or maybe under a certain topic, like let's say the initiation school, Murundu or whatever.
Yes.
I mean, those are considered as very sensitive a matter to say.
Yes.
Don't you need a ethical clearance? Maybe even from ethical clearance, you get it from the university anyway. But then, you are right to say, how do you approach those elders there? And I think what I can advise Busi, so if you are going to conduct research in those villages, don't wear a suit or something that you will feel like I can't sit in the guva. So just go there as an ordinary person, as a lay person. So
Yes.
don't wear your, you must look like them so that they can give you everything. It's just a funny comment from my side.
Yes,
Okay,
don't
thanks,
intimidate. Actually,
Sorry?
if you are going to, say for instance, you're going to investigate a mula and you want to go in there, you must first wear you must you then become a Chigwamatuke.
And initiate, yes,
You
and
are
initiate.
initiated in order to be accepted. So these are the ethics of the otherwise they will carry you mutu, and then they will take you to the
Forcefully.
to the mountain. They will force you to go there and be initiated. Ethics, yeah, those questions are very interesting.
Very, very, very critical. I love them.
Thank you very much. So this paragraph 6, colleagues, under conclusions, was talking about the maintenance of Venda indigenous technology. So I'm going to take you to the findings, because chapter 5 here, as you see, after how I've written, does have a discussion on the maintenance of Venda indigenous technology. So there it has got a discussion, but I also made an extract of from chapter 4 under data analysis, and people were this is an account of question 1.2. It is encouragement of maintenance of taboos and beliefs by traditional leaders and traditional healers. So traditional healers and traditional leaders have responded. So with respect to the maintenance of taboos, then they respond like this. The calling of gatherings was considered to be important for encouraging villagers. Villagers were educated about the taboos in such gatherings. In some cases, villagers are warned about specific taboos and they are reminded to observe them. Leaders might also call upon ward headmen to pass on this information to people subordinate to them. They themselves, that is the traditional leaders, would also conspicuously observe the taboos on the stipulated days so as to encourage others to do the same. That is why they will not always go to the sacred areas. They will only go there when they go to perform a ritual, or they will go there when they are going for a burial of one from the royal family. So, colleagues, we said the question was, does the conclusion show that it is giving effect to the data? Is it also giving effect to the discussions? it is also giving effect to the recommendations that were there. In other words, the conclusion is giving effect to everything that was said from chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, because all these conclusions are based on what is investigated. What is investigated is based on the research topic, the research aim, the research objectives, and the questions that were asked for the data to be collected under chapter 4, and the discussions under chapter 5, as well as recommendations and conclusions under chapter 6. So this shows that there is a linkage in everything, and there is no mistake. I don't think a person who has conducted research on himself or herself will make a mistake, because in every chapter you will be writing about this thing repetitively, but from various perspectives. So this makes sure that research is very logical, and this is how it should be written. And we have learned from the beginning of these workshops that just in the very beginning, some of the concepts are that research is systematic, is logical, to be scientific. So we are demonstrating here that this report demonstrates the logical flow and steps that had to be followed in order to accomplish the studies. Now here, we also have recommendations, and to show that recommendations, those recommendations that we were talking about were not thumb-sucked. They came from chapter 6. So what you see here is an extract. I've actually used a snippet tool to photocopy these pictures and paste them here. So we can see an introduction to chapter 6, which reads like this: management implications. While this research has shown that certain aspects of the Venda culture promoted nature conservation, it is necessary for conservation organizations to translate this useful knowledge into practice. With this end in mind, the researcher makes the following recommendations. So here are the recommendations. Remember, we had some recommendations which were only talking about future research, those we have dealt with. But apart from those, there are those that have got to do with policy implications, the implementation of the project for conservation by conservation organizations. Let's just read some of these recommendations. 6.16, it is evident that the Bavenda attach great importance to the survival of animal species. What these people need, therefore, is an ecological educational program that addresses the issue of species extinction. Such a program would enlist the support of the Venda people in the conservation of threatened and endangered animal species. In the next slide, I will show you what an endangered species looks like, and the danger that it faces, and why we're making this recommendation. The other recommendation, since most of the sacred areas are nowadays too small for conserving biodiversity, a pilot project should be conducted in order to identify ways of extending. No, this one we have spoken about. Let's just talk about 6.16 and see. I want to refer you to a pangolin. A pangolin, does anybody know this thing in cultural? Oh, unfortunately, I've already written. Oh, no, I didn't write the Venda name here. Memadim and Ramarumo, what is that? Okay, you say it's Kwara, and Mr. Ramarumo, what do you think this is?
The Kwara.
And Mr. Mloto, what is Kwara?
You should have started. Ramarumo, you should have started. You robbed me.
Yes. Okay, Mr. Mloto, what is it?
I know it looks scary, but it's for bewitching people, I'm sure.
Nibizani ngesikhenu. Nibizani.
Igama lakho ithiwani. Okay,
Angiyazi mina lento. I've seen it, but angiyazi.
Okay, masifune ngayo. It will become evident to you why I'm putting it as an example here.
Ask David, Doctor. Ask David too. Maybe he will tell us in his nationality. David, what do you call this animal in your language?
This is Kwara indeed. The two of you are correct. It is called a pangolin. Temminck's ground pangolin is the one that we find in South Africa. Smatia temminkia. You see, this is an endangered species because people are some people hunt it for medicinal purposes, some hunt it for meat. So we refer to it as bush meat. So it is disappearing. So in Chivenda, you don't touch this animal. And I think it might be there. Let me try to read and hear if it is part of what we my findings are. And my findings are with respect to question 4.1, 4.2, and 4.4. Traditional leaders, healers, and villagers' responses, all of them. Respondents stated Venda culture stated that Venda culture prohibited the killing of a number of animals. Thus, for an example, a Cape pangolin, which is the pangolin that you see there, may never be killed. If it is killed, the territory might be struck by drought. The blood of a pangolin should never touch the ground. In 1994, some of the respondents said this. In 1994, the villagers of Chauru, sorry, not Tahauru, it is Chauru, killed a pangolin, and in the following year, the territory was devastated by the gale. You see, there was gale wind, like tornado, that affected the area, because we believe the blood must not touch the ground. And in some instances, in another research that I conducted, I was told that if this has to be slaughtered, you slaughter a cattle first, then you take the skin, you put it on the ground, then that is where you can slaughter the pangolin, so that the blood does not touch the ground. This is how important this animal is considered. You can see it is a scaly animal, and the reason why it is like this is for protection purposes. When it is threatened, it will roll itself. In some pictures, it rolls itself like a songololo, and then you will only see what comes out, maybe the head or so, but the tail and the others would have tried to make a round ball, so that it is, you only see the scale on the outside. Yes, it is like that. You please Google pangolin. When you adjourn, Google pangolin, and when we meet again, you will tell me what pictures you saw and what you have read about it, because there is a movement which is trying to save and protect this animal. It has been listed in the red list by some international organization of the conservation of environment. So this was the last of the presentation and the last of the slides, but this is another evidence that the conclusions are actually from the data. This is from chapter 4, which was data. Yes, I see. David says they've got a lot of them here. Expert. No, it's fine. Thanks, David. No, it is Wusiso who says he has a lot of them at home. David, do you eat a pangolin? Do right there.
I will still call it pangolin. It's not very poor with my culture. I'm sorry about that. I don't know, maybe because I grew up in Lagos. Generally English was spoken to us by our parents. So going back to learn about this thing will be very difficult for me. But I know it's an endangered species, which will learn that the Chinese people are the one who eat this animal the most.
Yes. Yeah, actually, this morning I read when I Googled that the Chinese are actually looking for it. I don't know if it is important for medicine, but the Chinese are actually after this animal.
That's true. They eat it a lot, and that's why I think the world this group called Animal Protection Agency, they complain about it a lot, and they try to stop the Chinese from eating this animal. And if even they try to, they come to Africa to buy this animal, so they try to stop them from buying them.
Yes.
I learned about it some time ago.
Conservation is actually managing international trade of endangered species. So this is one also of the endangered species that is listed in a list, a red data list. So thank you very much. But did you grasp the discussion in the workshop well, David?
Yes, I grabbed it. I was able to. I was just following up with discussion. It's just that I've not been feeling fine. I have serious flu, so I've been very, very quiet. I've been indoors throughout the day, so that is why I'm not able to make any contribution. I'm not really feeling fine. Thank you,
but
sir.
thank you.
But thank you.
No, but thank you for your effort to attend, although you've got flu. And the final parting shot, Emmanuel and Sibusiso.
Thanks, Doctor. The presentation for the day was very interesting. I have two issues. Previously, it was mentioned that there can be possibilities of either you or the library people to present on the issue of citation, reference, and the plagiarism. I'm more interested on that because as I will be doing my master's research, I think I will need to be more capacitated on that. So your assistance in that, or planning to give us some more information on that, it will be highly appreciated. So then the second part, which I did not take down the slide number, but it is where you were talking about the objective presentation of the findings.
Yes.
There was a small table there for 2.19. My question on that is, since you interviewed villagers or group of people, when one opts to interview people, is there a limitation or it depends on the available information? Yes, that one. It depends on the data or information that you are getting. For example, if you are going to Alexander, you want to talk about poverty, for example. Am I limited to say I can pick 100 people or 200, or it depends on the interest? I am more interested on understanding if there's a limitation when I come up with a table of this nature, so that when it is received by the marking personnel or marking persons, yes, how or when is it that they will say, no, this analysis is satisfactory, unlike coming back with 5 interviewed, 2 declined, 3 were skeptical. So I'm interested on finding that. Thank you so much. But for the day, I enjoyed the presentation, and thank you so much.
Okay, let's start with this last one. When you interview, your sampling design will determine how many people you interview. Every time you must write how you will include people, how you will find them, what characterizes the people that are going to respond to you. When we dealt with sampling and sampling design, we noted that there are 2 categories of sampling designs. The major ones is probability and non-probability. With probability sampling designs, there you have got to have a population that is representative. And there are guidelines on how you can determine the number. But with non-probability, it is you use purposive sampling design, where you target people that will be able to give you information. If someone is not going to give you information, you exclude. So you will purposefully say, I will interview financial managers because I want to understand something about finances. If you want to understand something about poverty, you can interview an NGO that deals with a leader of an NGO that deals with poverty. You can ask a municipal manager or somebody who understands poverty. Or you can, if you want to interview everybody, is fine because everybody knows poverty. But there are subjects that can only be known by specific type of people. So there, you don't have to have a specific number, but purposefully you can do in-depth interviews. So it is not a survey, it would be depth interviews. Did I answer correctly, or I was at tangent?
100% correct. I'm clear, and thank you so much.
Yes, but there is a recording that is there when we from the workshop that we had on sampling design. You can access it from my UNISA, but otherwise you can still engage me one-on-one or through an email. Then we can deal with sampling designs so that we can be specific and advise you on how you can do it.
No, thank you so much. I think the second one is that, which was the first, that one of plagiarism, citation, and reference.
Okay.
So
yes,
yeah, thanks.
That one I do have a presentation ready, and I was doubtful if I would present. But if you say you want it, I will actually not hesitate to present it, because Lindelwa has already issued an invite to all of you to attend that one, and that one is the next one next week, next Thursday. If you really want it, we can deal with it. And I think some of you have shared what the Harvard citation style that UNISA is using. But I've also said I've come across a student who does not use the Harvard citations from psychology. They use another one. And I've seen that there are different types of them. So it would be interesting to not only look at the Harvard citation style, but also to look at the others that's used by others, because we must be inclusive, and we must not only be confined to one. Let us ensure that everybody benefits from our workshop. So if you are interested, then I would look at either 2 or 3 of them. Then we can centrally use the Harvard one as a performer, but make reference to the others, or we can present all of them interchangeably. So it means
Doctor, I'm back.
Yes. I want you to come in on this one, because you said there is a specialist librarian.
Yes. Yeah, I just wanted to come back to say, if you need maybe the variety of those citation style or referencing style, yes, the librarians can do it practically, and then they can show you even on the website to say this is how you go about it, citing and referencing, and but I'm not saying, doctor, you shouldn't give that session, but yeah, maybe you can do it as maybe you do 1 hour, and then the library staff do an hour, so that
they can show,
they can take them practically.
Beautiful. I do it where I've got an error or some gaps, they will complement, they will close.
They jump in. Yes.
Beautiful. Yes.
So I think what I'll do from my side, I'll invite and then check their availability, because I work closely with them. I collaborate with them, because library is information literacy, and then we deal with the writing, the reading and writing, and the structure of research. So I'll speak to them, and then I check their availability, and then if they are available, then I will let you know. Then I will invite them to the session. If not, you will continue.
Yes, and they can join us next time.
No, yeah. I'll try, because I enjoy your sessions, really. I'm also learning a lot.
Okay.
So David was struggling to mute. David, are you able? Did you able to unmute yourself now, and then you want to say something? Still struggling.
He spoke. He already spoke to us.
Oh, he did. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. All right.
And
no, perfect.
He also has flu.
Oh, is it like me?
Yeah. Like brother, like sister.
Like brother, like sister.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's fine. Next week we'll then focus on citation. So I think we can close the session, and I think I want to thank everybody here. And if you want the last word, you can close the session, Memadima.
No, other than saying really, I thank you guys, and thank you for such interactive session.